Jeannette Fiott and Irina Katz, and their talk is about a systematic review and critique of land art in Europe and beyond, applications in art therapy. Jeannette Fiott is a highly skilled and accredited psychotherapist, as well as a contemporary artist. She holds an MSc in art psychotherapy from Queen Margaret University in Scotland. She runs a psychotherapy clinic in Malta, and she coordinates the Eco Art Therapy Special Interest Group, SIG, in Europe. She also holds the esteemed position of country chair for arts leadership and films. So let's start with our first talk, a systematic review and critique of land art in Europe and beyond, applications in art therapy, by Jeannette Fiott and Irina Katz. Please.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for coming for this talk and presentation. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to share this time with you. And so let's start a bit about the presentation. And I work a lot globally, on a global level. So I travel a lot, I go to countries, I research, I present, I am a guest speaker, and also interact with the public and ethnographically research about the culture of the place. So this research took place in a context of a global context. It's still in its way, so I'm still working on it. I'm still gathering information about it. It's a dynamic presentation and research. So basically, the thought about this initiated at the EFAT, European Federation of Art Therapy, Special Interest Group on Eco-Art Therapy. So eco-art therapy, it's about going outdoors and taking the outdoors indoors in an ecosystematic way, taking that into consideration and context. So this research focuses on land art and what is land art and what is not. So basically, as a presentation, these are some images along the journey that I gathered when I went in different places, a systematic review and a critique of land art in Europe and beyond. So this land art, this is something about me. They have already introduced me, so I won't take a lot of time on this. And the research question, let's start from there. So the thought about this is, so this article shall examine land art as representing earth artworks using natural materials and landscapes to create designs and sculptures. The UNESCO World Heritage Sites, ancient stone temples, tapestry art, and stone carvings are considered part of this inquiry. On land art, it is particularly interested to address the integration of the symbolism found in land art across various European countries and beyond. This is achieved by context and critique of aesthetics, metaphorical meanings, spatial compositions, and cultural ecology, as well as by consideration of economic and political frameworks. So I would like to start also by with this quote: "Even if art is imprecisely executed, it is valuable if it contains something that communicates with the heart. Works of art with this kind of value have contradictory aspect. They express a desire for that as well as for life." And this is a quote by Li Yufan. So introduction. This critique about land art in Europe and beyond seeks to find the roots of land art, what it is and what it is not, Through this inquiry, we discover the socio-political aspects of land art, symbolic meanings, and land art as a community art therapy healing agent. Land art started as the art movement in the 1960s and early 1970s, mainly in Great Britain and the United States, with the pioneering work of artist Robert Smithson emerging in the most prominent articles. The other identified pioneers are Walter de Maria, Jean de Betz, Hans. So these are names that were identified during this research that are were prominent at the time. I can also give you this later on. Land art, also referred to as environmental art, earthworks, or earth art, is a movement that intrinsically links a particular landscape with the work of art, the artist's identity, the historical backgrounds of place, the present, and the future. The materials collected and used for the land art contain and convey a narrative of culture, place, and time. This movement took place during the era of the Cold War, civil rights and feminism movements. On a more micro level, we find the land artists shaping the land and being changed by it. Most land artists travel to other places and possibly to other cultures to create their projects. In exporting the land art project to a different location from the artist's roots, he needs to learn about the ecology of a different place, explore its composition, work with what is being offered, or possibly transport material. This moves the artist towards a vulnerable position of not knowing, becoming an apprentice in the new territory. There are practical logistics, but also an emotional attachment of falling in love with a site and determining that it is the right site for that artwork. Immersing in the creative process, the artist engages with vulnerability, power, fear, conquering, territoriality, and transformation. He simultaneously sculpts in his inner and outer landscape, developing new identities throughout. Land art finds its roots in the art movement and works of Robert Smithson, an American artist in the late 1960s, early 1970s, with his most famous work, Spiral Jetty. This land art is found at the Great Salt Lake, Utah. It is interesting to note Smithson's wife, Nancy Holt, worked on large-scale installations and was very influential in challenging gender stereotypes. Artist Robert Smithson died at a young age in a plane crash in 1973, and with the passing of his important advocate, the art movement is also said to have diminished with him. His spiral jetty lives on through the years, changing form and aesthetics. There is a sense of duality in the impermanence as well as the permanence of land art, having the marks disappearing and reappearing in time. The land art movement has emerged out of a rebellious act in moving away from the traditional canvas and museum frame in indoor space. The land artist explores working with spaces and landscapes that are bigger than oneself. In the contest, the land artist appears to be completely free to explore and create, yet there are other limiting factors restraining and conditioning this creation. Land art is always about a creative process. This process does not stop with the creation itself, as transformation keeps oscillating. This process, when a person visits an art exhibition at a museum, he is held and limited by visible frames, acting as visible links. Between the painting and the museum architecture, in the case of land art, the boundaries are invisible and more on an ecological macro level than micro, redefining the scale perceptions of the human body and the artwork. Land art does not only offer an infinite blank canvas. Limitations consist of socio-political restraints, resources available on site, what is acceptable and not acceptable at that particular region. in terms of environmental laws, culture, ethical, and religious. These complexities act as an invisible matrix, forming a holding space in which the land art is created and exhibited. Land art started as an art movement, mainly in Great Britain and the United States. Some of the prominent artists associated with the land art movement, okay, this we already said, so I'm moving because it goes into, again, the artists, but that I can forward later on. Land art also shares connections with other art movements of the time, such as minimalism and conceptual art, as it is often involved abstract or geometrical forms and has a conceptual approach to the relationship between art and nature. I'm just giving just those 2 minutes to digest a bit what I have said, and I'm continuing on. This is the history of land art. So let's move to the methodology of the study. The study forms part of a larger project to collect relevant data on land art and other related topics. A systematic review was used to map the information and select the most relevant sites and museums to visit and study in further depth. The research protocol outlined the land art locator, gathering information on land art characterization, reference identity, and the pioneers in this field, the period of its existence, the country and origin of region, end of origin and creation, and metaphorical meanings. The data gathering aimed to find scientific papers on which to base this critique. The protocol also included an ethnographic aspect of traveling to prominent museums and archaeological sites, photographing images, and researching their symbolic meanings at the time of creation. The data was then selected and organized into a table. 2 categories have been classified based on the selection on the time it was created. The land art movement has been used as a cutoff point, grouping the information as land art locator 1960s onwards and pre-land art locator. The data was inputted in the tables. There was more information about other sites, however, it was decided not to include them in this paper as more information is required for it to be analyzed. The selection criteria mainly focused on finding the roots of land art, identifying what it is and what it is not, in which context it takes place, and how it is relevant for today. So the main points are land art characterization, reference, country, region, and metaphorical meanings. So one might associate a landscape with a natural state or virgin land, yet the landscape is not always natural at all. If we take a park as an example, there is the manipulation of the natural landscape, a loss of the wilderness molded into aesthetically acceptable designs at the time of construction. In the process of reorganizing the environment, there is a forceful destruction, the eradication of the ancestral landscape, which can never be the same again. Something has been lost in favor of what it is to become another landscape at the same place where the other used to reside. At times, a terrain is shifted from one spot to another. New materials are brought in. Possibly new life is represented and the landscape rebirth takes place. In the same way, it is what's constructed. The minute the artwork is finalized, a decay process starts anew, and the landscape is again transformed. This time by way of natural elements of decaying and decomposition beyond the intervention of the artist. This reminds us the artwork is bigger than the person creating it in time, place, space. So life is a duality of death and life. The present ends becoming the past and makes way for the future. Land art has an element of muyo, a Japanese word representing this impermanence and expressing this existential state of being in constant change. Like the traveler adapts to the constant change of place and time, so does the aesthetical of land art leaves behind the erosion of transformation. So let's go through this. The findings were about the landscape, the land art in landscape, the graffiti, the street art, and graffiti is derived from the Italian word graffiare, scratch. The territory is zoned and shaped, becoming a colonized artistic reflection. The artistic ideas are placed on an existing structure, in turn entering a process of colonial reflection and artistic territoriality. Street art, while graffiti was somehow associated with homeless people passing through the place, street art seems to be emerging from a different inner space, a more thoughtful, elaborate design. Street art portrays a deeper sense of belonging and expresses a place-related identity, not just passing through. So these are, I've been to Sardinia. This is a ship that basically changes with the reflection of the sun. It wasn't meant to be a landmark, but it became an artistic landmark. This was Paris. This giant sculpture is the work of 93-year-old artist. This building was built by George Vuitton in 1912. There is an illustrative narrative of the painter making polka dots on a prestigious Art Deco building, accompanied by a culture of textiles and fashion. This was in Turin. The images illustrate street art by the river visited during the ethnographic visit. Symbol of freedom. So basically here I'm just giving an abstract of the presentation of this research. This research is very vast and I won't be able to illustrate it all here today. But it just gives an introduction of this research and I will be able to then present it further if someone is interested to know more about it and further on. So landmarks are also associated with spirituality, religion, and rituals. So I'm just wrapping it up, giving you the main gist of the presentation and of this research. Conclusion, this paper forms part of a larger project to continue mapping land art across Europe and beyond, and further understand its evolution, culture, and future vision. Land art is about creating art, incorporating landscapes, politics, artworks, culture, and heritage in one image. Land art is mostly associated with creating in indoor spaces. Yet there are other forms of land art. Land art contains an element of entropy and minimalism. Behind the land art images, there is scale, perception, a creative process, the identity of the artist, place identity, and the new transformed connection. Thank you.